I mentioned in my opening statement that the Use It Act was signed in 2020. I also alluded to the two CCUS permitting task forces that had been established, one for federal lands, one for non-federal lands. I'm interested to know, I'm going to start with you, Mr. Connor, and then I'm going to go to you, Mr. Cavanaugh, because you're on one of the committees, I believe. Now that these task forces have been chartered and are operating, do you believe that will make an impact on identifying opportunities to improve the permitting through these task forces as the law requires? Or, yeah, what is your opinion of the two committees now that are moving forward, and is that going to be as helpful as we would hope? Yeah.
Chairman Capito, I am confident today. Obviously, you've mentioned it was a slow start to get these task force established. But starting really in this summer, but in the fall, and as of recently, I'm actually been given the opportunity to lead the authoring of a section focused on permitting. So a lot of the information that we've talked about today in terms of Class 6 permitting and reforms will be within that report. So I have a lot of confidence that the report will be helpful to this committee and the other committees.
Does that report go to these two task forces? I mean, that's required by the law, the report?
Correct. The task forces are tasked with preparing guidance for this Senate committee, Senate Energy and Commerce,
Yeah.
House of Representatives committees for natural resources and transportation infrastructure, and the guidance are being prepared by both task forces to identify permitting and other challenges, and then ultimately making key recommendations to improve permitting process and promote the efficient, orderly, and responsible development of specifically CO2 Class 6 permitting.
Right, good. So, Mr. Cavanaugh, what's your perspective on this? Your view as a member of one of the federal lands permitting task force?
Thank you, Chairman Capito. Yeah, I share similar sentiments to Mr. Connors. The Task Force on Federal Lands is working to provide recommendations that are not only an amalgamation of the total experience in the room, which includes both industry, public policy experts, as well as folks from communities that will be receiving CCS technologies, but also working across a number of different agencies on federal lands in the Outer Continental Shelf. You're not only dealing with the Department of Interior, but also BOEM as well. Our recommendations will take into account the total information that we have from everyone, and will also be actionable in the near term. The one thing that I do want to stress, and this came from the gentleman who's leading my task force on the federal lands, is we need to replace the new political appointees before we're able to conclude the task force and give recommendations to you and to Congress.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Connor, you mentioned that there's 9 projects in North Dakota, is that correct, that have been permitted?
Yes, that's correct.
Could you just kind of real quickly, so that I can understand, because I think somebody mentioned it, I can't remember which one, that some projects are easier than others to permit. Could you tell me what those 9 projects, I mean, generally, are they natural gas plants? Are they ethanol plants? What are they? Industrial?
Chairman Capito, there are a variety of industrial sources. So the first project that was permitted was a single ethanol plant that just is sitting right on top of ideal geology.
Okay, so they have their well right there.
And then they've been operating since June of 22.
Okay.
There's also another ethanol plant, again, sitting on top of ideal geology, and that was also permitted. These were, in terms of scale, 180,000 to 200,000 metric tons of CO2 are being captured and injected on an annual basis. And then there's a third project that's operating that's co-located with the Great Plains Synfuel plant. Is through CO2 is being captured through the coal gasification process, and they're storing CO2 right there on site. They're also capturing that CO2 stream and transporting it via 205-mile pipeline to southern Saskatchewan for enhanced oil recovery, and they've been doing that since 2000. There's also permits that have been issued for CO2 capture and storage for the Milton R. Young Station, and currently that's operated by Minn Kota, and they are Minn Kota Power Cooperative, and they're currently working on determining their final investment decision for that carbon capture project. And then the latest project that's been approved is the Summit Carbon Solutions projects, and that's 3 large storage units that have been permitted in North Dakota there.
So what is that a power generator or?
Summit has aggregated, I believe it's over 50 ethanol and other biofuels facilities in kind of in the Corn Belt, in the Iowa, southern Minnesota, eastern Nebraska, and eastern South Dakota and North Dakota, and with intents to construct a network of pipelines to bring that CO2 to western North Dakota.
Okay, well, I would just say, I think that's very interesting because I think part of what the ranking member was alluding to, that certain types of projects haven't really been able to move forward with the Class 6 for whatever reason, but you did line out what those reasons are: cost of the retrofit, CO2 pipeline permitting, and then the long lead times, which has led to probably some confusions. And if the political appointees can be gone forward and confirmed, that may alleviate some of the long lead time issues. Senator Kramer. So I'm going to ask a question. Mr. Cavanaugh, you've done a lot of work on direct air capture. I guess I'm curious to know, are any of the wells that have been permitted direct air capture wells? And what kind of, Mr. Connors lined out 3 difficulties for getting these projects moving: retrofitting, permitting on the pipelines, and long lead times. How does direct air capture work into this? Is the technology fully proven? And who is doing this work?
Thank you, Chairman Capito. So to my knowledge, there's been one conditional permit in West Texas for the Occidental Petroleum Stratos facility, a Class 6 well, the Pelican project, Brown Pelican project, that is specific for a direct air capture, project. As a general rule, Class 6 wells, you need, mostly for economic standpoint, you need about 1 million tons a year down well to make it worth putting in a permit for. As of yet, there are no direct air capture projects that can remove 1 million tons a year. So unlikely that many Class 6 wells will uniquely be situated for a single direct air capture project. Direct air capture shares many of the similar challenges associated with point source capture. However, instead of removing it from a relatively concentrated source out of a power plant industrial, right, it's moving directly out of the ambient air. The number one thing that we can do to drive down the cost of direct air capture is cheap, abundant power. At the end of the day, 80% of the cost associated with DAC is heat, 20% is related to electricity, and we need cheap, abundant power sources, whether that's natural gas with CCS, nuclear, hydro, geothermal. We need not just those projects to be built, but we need the large transmission lines to be able to carry that energy to these projects to drive down the cost on the capture side. They share the same concerns on pipeline permitting and CO2 storage, although a benefit of direct air capture is because you're pulling out of the ambient air, you can site directly on top of geologic storage to minimize the amount of the pipelines you need.
Let me ask you this. Can you combine a direct air capture project with a point source capture project to make it to that scale that you've talked about?
Yeah,
Is
absolutely.
that permissible? I don't know.
Yeah. So this is happening today with a lot of direct air capture projects where they're deploying this, for instance, the South Texas DAC hub, and also the Cypress project, which is direct air capture hub facility in Louisiana, are deploying in industrial-rich areas where they can aggregate the carbon capture from these industrial sources alongside of their direct air capture to make the unit and project economics better.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned the need for more energy, because as you create the energy, and you mentioned, and you said natural gas with CCUS, so then you're double CCUSing in one project. You're CCUSing to get the energy to do the direct air capture. I don't see how the economics of that will work. Maybe into the future, hopefully. But we have a repeating theme here, and I mentioned it in my opening statement, of the reliabilities, because not only is this an intensive process, the process we see on AI and other things, are putting great pressures on our potential for providing electricity for all of this. But the key to all of this, and it's not the only key, but it's the key to every one of these projects, is a permitting process that you can move along. You can't permit a nuclear plant, you can't permit a pipeline, you can't permit a transmission line. You're sort of at every point of the project, all hands point to permitting. And so any help that you can give us with permitting Class 6 and those pipelines, I think will cross-benefit all projects. And I think what's good about it is, as Senator Whitehouse said, this is going to be a bipartisan push. It's the only way to do it effectively, to get it into legislation, because we see what happens with the regulatory environment as the shifts of administrations go from one to the other at the federal level. So I would just say I really appreciate you all being here today. I'm going